Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to cover MongoDB. And MongoDB is a database solution for you to store data for your application. Now, MongoDB is pretty different than the prototypical databases that you have been using, like Postgres or MySQL. And the reason for that is because MongoDB is actually a NoSQL database. And essentially, NoSQL databases are just a group of databases that don't fall in the SQL category. For instance, they don't use SQL to execute queries and mutations. Also, they store their data in different ways. So typically, SQL databases, they store their data in tables and they relate data through foreign keys. However, NoSQL databases, they find some other way to store their data. Now, there's many different types of NoSQL databases, and there's many different ways that we can actually store data, but MongoDB actually uses the collection document model, and this is by far the most popular way of storing data in a NoSQL database. And actually, MongoDB is by far one of the most popular collection document databases out there. And there's a lot out there. There's DynamoDB, and there's other NoSQL databases that you can even think of, like Redis for caching that doesn't follow the document collection model. There's graph databases that we can use. There's multiple out there, but MongoDB is a very popular one as an alternative to the prototypical SQL databases. So before we actually dive in and start, looking into MongoDB and start executing some queries, let me just quickly explain to you what I mean about the collection document model. So the way that MongoDB stores its data is inside of collections. So over here we have a prototypical MongoDB database, and in here we have multiple collections. So we can have as many collections as we want. And then inside of these collections, we actually have multiple documents. And the documents are basically that piece of data, that one piece of data. Now, this might be a little bit confusing, but if you come from a SQL background, you can think of a collection as a table, and you can think of a document as a row. But to kind of quickly illustrate that even more to you, let's go here and let's look at an example. So over here, let's say we have some sort of social media application and we need a way to store our data. So we have a social media MongoDB database. And then over here, we have two different collections. Over here, we have a users collection. And then over here, we have a posts collection. So inside of this users collection, we are going to store all of the data that is associated to users. And over here, in the post collection, well, we're going to have all of the data that is associated to posts. So we can have multiple posts here, and we're going to store that in here inside of the collection. So again, you can really think of these as tables, a way to separate our data. Now, the single unit of data that is stored inside of a collection is known as the document. And this, you can really think of it as a row if you want to kind of think of it as analogous to SQL. So right here, we have our documents, and these documents are stored in a JSON format. So you can see here, JSON is really just an object with key value pairs. So you can see here we have an object, and then in here we have name, we have lathe harb, age, we have 24, we have, created at, which is a date, and then we also have gender, which is true or false. So instead of rows, we're basically storing our data through JSON. Now internally, actually, MongoDB stores the data in BSON, but you really don't have to worry about that. Maybe it's just good to know. Really, ultimately, we're going to be sending JSON to the server. It's going to convert it to BSON, but then when we want to extract data, it's going to send us JSON. So we're really going to be just dealing with JSON. Now, one thing that's really interesting about this is you can see here that these objects look kind of different. So these two documents inside of this collection, the makeup of the JSON object is actually a little bit different. So you can see here, okay, well, we have a name that's a string. Over here, we also have a name that's a string. Over here, we have an age that's a number. Over here, we also have an age that's a number. We have a created at that's a date. And then similarly over here. But you can see here, gender, this is a Boolean value for this particular document. However, for the users collection, this is actually a string or maybe an enum. Well, okay, this is kind of strange. Why is there a mismatch between the actual types? So over here we have a Boolean type, over here we have a string type. Why do we have this mismatch? Similarly, over here we have this is celebrity key right over here, and this is a Boolean, but we don't even see it inside of this document. Again, very, very strange. Well, the reason why we can actually do this in MongoDB is because MongoDB is absolutely schemaless. It does not enforce any strict schema. With a SQL database, this would be impossible. We would not be able to do this. We would have to enforce a schema, and every single row in that table would actually have that column. And every single row that has that column would have to be some sort of type that we have specified. For instance, we can't have a Boolean for gender in one row and a string in another row. But because MongoDB is schemaless and flexible, we're actually able to do this. This object can be literally whatever we want. This document right here can consist of an object that has maybe it's completely empty, while the other one has a bunch of data. Now, obviously, you would never probably want to do this, but this is completely fine with MongoDB. And as a result, it actually allows us to have a lot more flexibility. Now, with more flexibility comes more responsibility. Ultimately, we probably don't want to do this. We don't want to have gender that is true, and then over here, another document that gender is some sort of string. That could really make the application kind of complicated. But again, we have more responsibility. We have to really kind of internalize and think exactly what it is that we want to do. So that is basically how data in MongoDB is stored. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. Now, in the next sections, we're actually going to go ahead and install MongoDB locally on our machine, and then we're going to start figuring out how we can perform the CRUD operation. So CRUD stands for create. So how can we actually create a document and put it in a collection? How we can read certain documents. So how can we basically read all of the documents in a collection, or how we can filter for specific documents. Let's say I only want a document where the name is Laith Harb, or I only want the documents where the age is less than 20 or something like that. And then U stands for update. So how can we update documents? So maybe I am now 25 and we want to update that to 25. And then lastly, D stands for delete. And then so how we can delete documents. Let's say I again decide that, hey, I don't want to use a social media application anymore. So we want to delete that document. So we're going to figure out how we can perform these amazing CRUD operations in the next section. So stay tuned. Time for the best part of any crash course, the installation and setup process. Of course, if we want to use MongoDB inside of our local machine, we have to install it into our local machine. And the way that we install it is actually going to be quite different whether we are on Windows or on Macs or Linux. So let's actually just quickly discuss exactly how we are going to be doing this installation and how you can go ahead and try to do it yourself depending on your operating system. So what I need you to do is to go to this website right over here, docs.mongodb.com/manual/installation. And in here, it has all the steps that you need to take to install MongoDB locally on your machine. So once you go here, and I'll have this link in the description, so don't worry about that. Once you go here, you can see here, let me quickly just zoom in a little bit. You can see here MongoDB installation tutorials. And over here we have Linux, Mac, Windows, or Docker. We don't have to do this for Docker, but you probably are either using Windows, Mac, or Linux. So you can see here that there's many different editions that you can install and many different installation processes. Now you're going to probably want to use the community edition because that is the free edition that we are able to use. The enterprise is for larger companies that are ultimately going to cost us a little bit of money if we use it. So let's try to download the community edition. Now the way that you're going to download it is again a little bit different depending on your operating system. I'm on Mac, so what I can do is I can just say install MongoDB community edition on Mac, and then you can go here and you can just read through the tutorial. Now for Mac it's relatively easy. I really suggest going with the homebrew route. So what I suggest doing is installing homebrew if you don't have that already, and there's actually a link here for installing homebrew. And essentially homebrew is a very popular Mac package manager. And then really all you have to do is inside of your terminal run these commands. So run brew tap mongodb /brew. I already did it, so just go ahead and open it up and run it. It shouldn't take too long. And then afterwards, go ahead and do brew install mongodb-community. And then after you're done, you can see here that it actually configures and creates these files and folders for you. And after you're done, run this command over here. And essentially what this command does is it starts up our MongoDB server inside of our local machine. So brew services start MongoDB community. And then the last thing that we can do to basically check that, hey, our MongoDB database is installed correctly is actually go into our terminal and just saying Mongo. And if we get this whole blob of text, then yes, we have successfully installed MongoDB. And actually inside of this terminal is where we are going to be executing all of our commands to insert, read, update, and delete data. This is actually known as the MongoDB shell, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that is how we do it for Mac. Again, if you are on Linux, I highly suggest looking into one of these options. Probably the Ubuntu is probably going to be most common for you. If you are on Windows, it is also a relatively easy process. So you can just go ahead and click on it, and you can see here that you just go to the download center and you just download a file, and then you can go ahead and just follow some other instructions. As you can see over here, there's just a little bit more tedious work, unfortunately, for Windows. I can't really replicate this because I don't have a Windows machine, so hopefully this documentation is relatively thorough. And then after you actually install this on your local machine, you can go ahead and just say Mongo and test it out, and you should be able to see this exact terminal. Now once you get to this step, having whatever OS system you have does not matter. Everything at the end of the day is going to be exactly the same. So one last thing that I want to download is Robo3T, and this is actually an easy download for both Windows and Mac. So it's called Robo3T. So let's go ahead, and you can see here this is Robo3T, and this is just basically a GUI that allows us to visualize and actually see our MongoDB database. So what we can do is you can go ahead and download this. This is a very, very easy step. Literally all you do is you just download it, and then you click on the executables to install Robo3T and Studio 3T. And this is just, again, a GUI that allows us to actually see our data. Again, I am not going to do this. This is very, very easy, whether you're on Mac or Windows, so I'm not going to do it, and that's because I already did it. And you should get basically these two over here. Now, I would suggest go to Studio 3T. So go to Studio 3T. It's going to ask you to create a master password. I already did that. So let's go ahead and, all right. So now you can see here that essentially now what we can do is we can connect to a database. So let me quickly just zoom in a little bit over here. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can zoom in. But now what we can do is inside of Robo3T, we can actually connect to a database. So what we can do is we can go to this connect section, and you can see here that I'm already connected to my local host database. Let me actually go ahead and delete this connection. And then what we can do is we can write new connection, and then over here all we have to basically say is what the server is. So over here the server is actually a local host. So local host is the server because we installed it locally, and the port is 27017, which is the port, MongoDB port by default. You can give it a name of, I don't know, local host, and then what we can do is we can go ahead and save it. Then we can go ahead and connect to it. And now you can actually see, I hope this is big enough, but now you can actually see the databases inside of our MongoDB server. So you can see here we have an admin database, we have a config database, and a local database. And these are actually some of the default databases that exist once we create our MongoDB server. And we can actually tell this by, let's zoom in here a little bit. We can do show DBs. Again, now we are in the shell, so we can actually have all of the commands inside of the shell to essentially create, update, and delete data. And we can also have commands like this that allows us to show us all of our databases. So we have our admin, our config, and our local. Now, obviously, what we're going to ultimately want to do is add data and add different databases and add different collections. But right now, these are basically our kind of configuration, our default databases that we probably don't want to touch. We don't want to store data in here. We want to store data in another database. But if you get this all up and running, great, that is terrific. In the next sections, we're going to explore how we can actually start interacting with our database. Before we start talking about how we can create documents, read documents, update documents, delete documents, let's talk about how we can actually communicate to our MongoDB server. And this is important because we need to have that communication in order to execute all of these different commands, all of these CRUD operations. Now, in a typical application, we are going to have some sort of server that it has to communicate to the MongoDB database. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, there's actually two approaches that you can take, and let's talk about them right now. So you can use, one approach is the drivers. MongoDB has a bunch of inherent drivers that you can use to communicate to your MongoDB server. And actually, if you go to the documentation, and then if you go to docs.mongodb.com/drivers, you can see the many different drivers that you can use. And the many different drivers that you use are going to be dependent on the language of the server that you are using. For instance, if you're using Node.js, well, you're going to use a Node.js driver. If you're using Swift or Ruby, you're going to be using different drivers. Now, again, these drivers are inherent to MongoDB itself. And you can really think of these as executing raw SQL commands, but in an object-oriented fashion. Now, another way that you can go ahead and communicate to your server is something known as an ODM. And this is an object document mapper. And this is some sort of external library, maybe some other individual made it, that allows us to communicate with our MongoDB server to be a lot easier than the inherent drivers. Now, there's multiple ODMs out there, and they're going to be multiple depending on the language that you use. But one popular ODM for JavaScript is Mongoose. And this is an example of, well, a ODM for a Node application when you want to connect to MongoDB. Now, again, what it does is it allows us to easily connect to our MongoDB server and perform these CRUD operations. Now, in this section, what we're going to do is we're actually going to learn how to connect to MongoDB and actually communicate with it through drivers. Because if you know how to do it through the drivers, you can quickly learn how to do it with ODMs later on. Because drivers is basically the base point. You need to have this base knowledge, and then later on you can expand to an ODM. Now, what driver are we going to be using? Well, we're going to be using the Node.js driver. And the reason for this is because this shell over here is actually a JavaScript driver. So, and what it does is it allows us to communicate to our MongoDB instance, and this is going to be the instance inside of localhost, and this allows us to communicate with it through basically the MongoDB driver node commands. And this is why we are going to be using JavaScript, because we want to basically use the shell. Now, everything that we learn here, we can actually translate it into a real node application. And similarly, then we can actually go ahead and move on to an ODM once we have this base knowledge. And so this is why we're going to be using the shell, and it's pretty convenient. All we have to do is just say Mongo, and then we can go ahead and start interacting with our MongoDB database. Let's first discuss how we can insert data inside of our MongoDB database. Now, let's first remember exactly where data is stored inside of our MongoDB server. Inside of our MongoDB server, we have our databases. And inside of the database, we have multiple collections. And that is where the single unit of data is going to be stored, of course, as a document. So if you want to insert data into our MongoDB database, we first have to specify what database we want to use and what collection we want to insert that data into. Again, remember, we have a database, collection, and then the documents. And the document, again, is the data that we are ultimately going to be inserting. So the first thing that we actually have to do is specify what database we want to use. Now, from the default, you can see here when we do show DBs, we have these three databases inside of our server. Of course, these are the databases that we don't probably want to use. Let's actually create a brand new database for our application. Now, for our application, we're just going to store a bunch of data related to animals, let's say. So we're going to call this database animals. So how do we create a database called animals? Well, we do that through the use command. And what this does is it uses a specific database. So essentially what we can say is, hey, MongoDB, we want you to use the config database, or we want you to use the local database. And you can see here that it switched to DB local. Now, if the database does not exist, MongoDB is going to go ahead and create it. So now what we can do is we can say use animals. And what that does is actually create the animals database. Now what we want to do is we want to insert data into this animals database. But again, we have to insert it into some sort of collection. So let's say we are inserting an elephant into this data, and we want to basically categorize it in the mammals collection. So what we do is DB, and DB basically is the database that we're currently using, which is the animals, and then dot the collection name. Now the collection name, we're going to call it mammals. Again, if we don't have a collection, what it does is it automatically creates this collection for us. And then we're going to specify a command that is going to insert a document into this collection. And this is going to be the insert one command. And it's going to, well, as it says, insert one document into the mammals collection. So we're going to go ahead and let me execute this. And in here we have our JSON object. So we can say basically the type of the animal is, well, an elephant. So we can have elephant, and then over here we can have the name of the animal as John. We can also have the age be 54. We can have the gender. We're gonna have the gender be false for female, let's say, and then we can have multiple things in here. Let's add one more thing in here. Let's add its weight. So let's add its weight, and it is a very, very heavy animal. We're gonna say it's 400 kilograms, and this is a number. So now what we can do is we can go ahead, and you can see here that it went ahead and it inserted. And we got this right over here, this kind of object back saying that, hey, acknowledge true, basically saying that yes, we inserted this. And then it gave us this object ID. Now, For each document, MongoDB is going to assign it with a UUID ID. So now what we can do, if we go to Studio 3T and we refresh, so we right click and refresh, what we'll see is we'll see our animals database. And now you can see here that we have a collection in here. And if we actually click on the collection, you can see here that we have the mammals collection. So over here, this folder has all of the collections. And then in here, we have the mammals collection that we specified. So if we double click on it, we can see that we actually inserted a new record. So over here, you can see the ID that was manually created. Over here we have elephants. I wish I could zoom in here, but I guess I can't. We have elephants. And then over here we have the name, the age, the gender, and the weight. So that right there is how we can basically insert data into our database. Now, let's say we want to insert multiple records. Well, we can do that with the insert many command. So let's actually go back here. You can see here that this is insert one. But let's say we want to insert multiple. We don't just want to insert one. We want to insert maybe 10 or 20 or 30. Well, we can do that with the insert many command. And instead of an object, we specify an array of objects. So over here we have an array, and then, oops, okay, let's redo this again. So over here, let's have an array here. And then let's go all the way here. And we're gonna say encompass this in an array, and then we're gonna change the command to insert many. And now what we can do actually is, let me just actually insert this, and then we can just show you how this works. So I'm gonna go ahead and insert it, and you can see here that it acknowledged it. And now if I do a refresh, so let's do a quick refresh over here. Let's do a refresh. All right, and now let's double click on this. You can see here that we actually have two right here, but this one was inserted inside of an array. So basically what we can do is we can have as many objects in there as possible. And let me quickly try to execute that. Let's go ahead here and let's create another object inside of this array. So inside of this array, and over here we're gonna have a type of lion. So we're gonna have a type of lion. We're gonna have a name of Simba. We're gonna have an age of 22. We're also going to have a gender of true, and then we're also going to have I don't know, let's have the weight be 200 kilograms. And now for the elephant, let's actually do something a little bit intriguing. Let's actually just completely omit the weight. Let's completely omit this weight. And then for the gender, let's have it be a string of male. And then let's also completely, okay, actually we'll leave the elephant. Let's make the name something else. Let's make the name Lath. And then let's make the age just, I don't know, let's make it 44. All right, so let's go ahead and insert it, and you can see that it has successfully inserted. And now what we can do is we can actually visualize this. So if you do a quick refresh, you can see here that it is completely fine. And you can see what actually happened is this field is completely missing. And this is really because this is JSON. This is not a table. This is JSON. So the schema is inflexible. And over here we have a bunch of Boolean values. You can see here true or false, but this is male. So you can see how flexible this can be. Now, ultimately, we probably don't want to do this. And I'm actually going to delete this record a little bit later on when I show you how to delete things. Because this is really going to mess things up for us. Because, you know, we probably want to be a little bit careful with this flexibility. With this great flexibility becomes, we have to have great responsibility. Alright, so that is basically how we insert data into our MongoDB database. In the next section, let's actually talk about how we can find data. Now that we have inserted data inside of our database, inside of our collection, let's talk about how we can actually query for that data and read that data. And read the data that we actually want, because we might not want every single document in the collection. We might want to apply some sort of filter. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is go back to the MongoDB shell and delete every single record that we have inserted. We inserted 4 documents. I want to go ahead and delete them. We'll talk about how to delete things later, but for now just do db, which is our animals database, and then we want to go inside of the collections and we want to remove every single record, every single document inside of this collection. And then we're inside of this parentheses, we're going to specify some curly braces. And essentially what this is saying is that, hey, we want to delete every single document inside of the collection. When you insert this, you should see that you get this n removed. I have 0 because I actually previously deleted them, but you should see 4 records being deleted. Now let's go ahead and let's insert some records now. Now I don't want to insert these records manually because, well, it takes forever. So what I did is in my GitHub page, let me zoom in here a little bit, I actually have a bunch of data that we can actually use. So go to this repo inside of my GitHub page. I'll put the link in the description, and you can go ahead and just copy this data. And essentially all this is just a type, and that's the type of the animal. Then we have the name, the gender, the age, and the weight. Alright, so let's, what's going on here? Let's quickly copy this. I'm not sure why that keeps happening, but let's copy that. And now in here, let's just do a typical db.mammals.insert many. And we're gonna have in here, let's actually paste that right in there. And you should see that we have inserted all of these documents. And if we go to our GUI, we should see all of these documents. You might have to refresh, so let's go ahead and refresh just to double check that everything is a-okay. Actually, you can just refresh by double clicking on it, and there we go. Everything is fine. Everything is in there. Okay, cool. So now let's look into how we can find our documents and read them. Well, we can find them with the .find command. So essentially what we can do is we can do db specifying the database that we want /mammals, which is the collection, and then .find. And then in here we're going to specify curly braces. And these curly braces are essentially a filter. We might not want to find every single record. We might want to filter for specific records. So we're going to specify that curly brace. But if we want every single record, then we have empty curly braces. There's nothing in here. There's no real filter in there. And then when we execute it, you can see that we get back all of our data. And to make it pretty, what we can do is append the .pretty method. And you can see here that, hey, we get all of our data. So find is one method to, well, find data. There's also another method called find one. So find one. And, well, as this says, it finds one document. And then in here, we can specify a filter. So we can either specify whatever filter, or we can specify, maybe we want the age to be 3. We want to find one document where the age is equal to 3. If we execute this, you can see here that we get this one document. Now let's say that we want to find one document where the type is equal to elephant. And as you can see here, we have a document here where the type is equal to elephant, similarly over here, similarly over here. There's actually many documents where the type is equal to elephant. So what do you think is going to happen if we do that with the find one command? Let's do elephant. You can see that it still just returns 1. And actually what it does is it basically finds the first one that follows this filter and it returns it. And that happens to be Sammy. Now if we change this to find, well, this is going to return, I'm going to do the .pretty. This is going to return all of them where they're elephants. So you can see here we have Sammy, we have Ed, and then we have John. So essentially find one will always return one, and if there are more than one document that follows that specification, it just returns the first one that it finds. So yeah, so that's basically how we perform filters. Now let's actually talk about some more complicated filters. Let's say I want to find all of the animals that are older than 20. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that very, very easily. And we can actually do that with comparison operators. So you can see here we have equal to, greater than or equal to. We have in, less than or equal to, and then these ones as well over here that we'll talk about a little bit later. But right now, let's say we want to use greater than. So essentially, we want to get all the animals that are 20 or older. So that should be, and let's actually just do a quick mammals dot find, and let's just get all of them. Of course, I always forget the dot pretty. Let's prettify it. So we want to get all of the animals that are 20 or older. So we should get John, we should get Eddie, we should get Sam, we should get Barry, we should get John. You guys know what I mean. So let's go about doing that right now. So in here, let's actually apply that pretty command. In here, we're going to say that, hey, we want the age, and then this is not going to be a number. This is going to be an object. And then this object is going to have the greater than sign, which is the comparison operator. And then we're going to say 20. And then over here, you can see that we get all the animals that are older than 20. We get Sammy, we get Ed, we get John, we get Barry, we get Eddie. But notice that we don't get any animals that are 20. And that's exactly what we wanted. So we should see John the cheetah. And that's because, well, the command that we did is greater than. To get all the animals that are greater than or equal to 20, we just say this. So greater than or equal to. And then now we can see we have John as well as Sam. Now we can also say less than. I'm not going to go over that. It's exactly the same. But I will go over in. In is a very special one. Let's say we want to find all of the elephants and the horses. So how could we do that? Well, we could say, okay, well, we want to find the type. And then we could say where the type is inside of this array. In this array, we're going to say elephant and horse. And so you can see here now we get the horse, we get a few elephants as well. So that's basically what that is doing. And, you know, of course, we have the opposite of not in. So we can say, well, we want all the animals that are not elephants or horses. We can say not in. And now we have the mouse, the cheetah, the sloth, the bear, the lion, and another bear. But no elephants or horses. All right, so cool. So that's pretty cool. But sometimes we want to make more complex filters. So to do that, we might need to use logical operators. And these logical operators are and, not, nor, or. So these are very, very, very common ones. So and, so you know, we want two conditions. So let's say we want, let's actually begin with actually trying it out with or actually. So let's say we want to find all the animals at the extreme ages. So we want to find all the animals that are very young and all the animals that are very old. So to do that, we're going to say, hey, we want all the animals that are less than 20 or all the animals that are greater than 50. So how do we execute this? Well, to do that, we would do mammals.find, and then in here we're not going to go ahead and just specify the property that we want to define. So we're not going to go here and do type or age. We're going to go ahead and specify the operator, so the logical operator that we want to use. So we're going to say or, so this is the operator that we want to use, and then we're going to say, well, or, and then this the value of this is going to be an array. And this inside of the array is going to be all the conditions that we want to be met. So it's going to be either the first condition or the second condition or the third condition or whatever. So to specify conditions, of course, we need to have objects. So in here we can say that the age is, let's say, less than, so here we have combination of logical and comparison operators, so is less than or equal to 20, and then we're going to have another condition. We can have as many conditions as we want, and they don't have to be just age. It could be, hey, the age is less than 20, or the type is elephant, or something like that if we wanted to. But over here, we're just going to say greater than, and we're going to say greater than 50 is what we said. All right, so let's go ahead and let's execute this. So we can do dot pretty, and we get some data. So again, all these animals should be greater than 50 or less than or equal to 20. And as you can see here, that is exactly what we get. So that right there is the OR. Now let's say we want to get all the animals in between. So let's say we want to get all the animals that are greater than 20 and less than 50. In that case, we're going to use the AND. So we want the animals to be greater than 20 or and less than 50. So simply we can just execute the same thing, but with AND. So we can go ahead and just execute that, but with AND. And we can say that, hey, we want it to be greater than 20, and then we want it to be less than 50. And if we execute this, you can see here we get the elephant, which is 24, Barry, which is 33, and then we get 24 for Eddie. Now let's start talking about updating data, which is very, very common in an application. For instance, in our database, we might want to update the age, maybe want to update the name, maybe we renamed the animal, or we want to update the weight. So updating is something that occurs, well, quite frequently inside of our database. So let's talk about how we can update. Now, similarly to the find commands, we have two commands for updating. We have update one and update many. And you can probably imagine what these two commands do and how they differ. So let's start with updating one, which allows us to update just one document. Now, when updating a document, we actually have to specify two different things. The filter that we want to essentially have to find that document, and then what we want it to update it to. So again, we need the filter to find the document, and then what we want to update, what fields we want to update. So we need two pieces of information when handling updates. So let's go about and let's update. Now the first thing I want to do is just do db.find, and then let's just find all of our data. And let's make it pretty. And let's just say what we want to do is we want to update Eddie, and we want to make him 25. Now, essentially, we're going to have to find this document. Now, we can say that, okay, well, find the document where the type is Bear or the name is Eddie. But the thing is, hey, you know what? We might have other documents where the type is Bear or the name is Eddie, or the type is Bear and the name is Eddie. But the best thing to do is actually just to filter by the ID, because this is really, really great because it's always going to be unique. So what we can do now is we can do db.mammals.update1. And then in here, we're going to specify our filter inside of this object. So we're going to say underscore ID is equal to, well, this object ID right over here. And then we're going to do comma, and then we're going to specify what we want to change. Here we want to change the name, or sorry, not the name, the age from 24 to 25. So to do that, what we can basically do is use the $set property. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to take all of the objects that we have specified right over here and essentially replace them inside of the document. So now what we can do is basically say that, hey, we want to basically set the age to 25. And we can set multiple fields. It doesn't have to be just one field. We can also set the name to, I don't know, Ed 3Ds or let's 1D right over here, Eddie. Let's actually just do that right now. So you can see here that this failed, and that's because, of course, I have to wrap this in a string. So now if we execute this, you can see that, okay, one got matched and then one got modified. So now if I were to do a db.mammals.find.pretty, you can see if I go to Eddie, well, Eddie got changed, the name got changed as well as the age. And update many works in a very similar way, except of course it's going to update all of the documents that match that condition rather than the first document that matches that condition. So let's actually talk about update many. Let's actually give that a go, and let's actually increment every single animal's age. So we want to update all of the animals' ages. Now we could do that through obviously .set, and then we can manually increment the age of every single animal, but that's not really that ideal. We can actually do that with one command through a special operator, the inc operator. So what we can do here, and notice here that we have a 20-year-old cheetah, a 15-year-old horse, and 3-year-old mouse. So what we can do is we can do db.mammals.update many, and then the first condition is the filter. In this case, we're just gonna have an empty object to filter every single document. And then the second filter is going to be, well, $increment. And then in here, we're gonna say that we want to increment the age by 1. So we can go ahead and you can see here 10 got matched, 10 got modified. So now you can see that every single animal got increased. And of course you can apply this with the $set. You can actually apply the increment as well as the set in the same command. Now the last thing I want to do is, let's say we want to update a document, but the filter doesn't match any existing documents. So what's going to happen is, well, nothing's going to happen if we use the commands that we do right now. But let's say if the filter doesn't match anything, we actually want to go ahead and create that document. So we either want to update it, but if it doesn't match anything, we want to create it. And that is known as upserting. So that creates a document if it doesn't exist, and if it does exist, we just simply update it. That is known as upserting. So let's go ahead and let's actually do that. So let's say we want to update 1. So we want to update 1, and oops, let's go here. And we want to update 1, and we want the name to be Mac. So that's the filter. Name is Mac. Now note that there is no animal with name Mac in here. And essentially what we want to do is we want to do a set rather than inc right over here. So we want to $set. And then what we want to do is we want to say, hey, we want to set the type to elephant. We want to also set the age to, let's say, 36, as well as the weight to 20. Now, as the last command, to ensure that this actually upserts, we're going to add the upsert command, and we're going to say true. So now what we can do is execute this. Seems like it's failing for some reason, but let's see if it actually succeeded. So let's just find pretty, and it actually seemed like it didn't upsert it, unfortunately. I believe it was an elephant called Mac, and it doesn't seem like it upserted it. Let's try it again. Let's go over here, and we're going to update 1 where the where is this? Where's the command? I lost the command. I think it didn't execute because I just lost it. Let's just try it again. So let's do db.update1 sorry, not db.update1, db.mammals.update1, and then over here we're going to specify the filter. So the name is going to be type Mac. And then we're going to specify what we want to set it to. So we do $set. And let's do type. And let's just do a special type, actually. Let's do type. What's a good mammal? What's a good mammal? Mammal. I'm really drawing a blank. Honestly, I know a snake is not a mammal, but I'm drawing a blank right now. So let's do type snake. Let's do the age, and the age is going to be 2. And then the weight is 2. And now again, what we want to ultimately do is upsert this. So we can specify over here, upsert of true. So again, let's give this an execute. You can see here that, okay, it matched none, but it did upsert something. So now if I go over here, you can see that we have Mac, the snake, and the age, and the weight. So it actually created it. And of course, because we didn't specify the gender, it didn't add that in there as well. Now, one thing that we can do is basically update. Now we can essentially update this. And in here, what we can do in the .set, we can basically say that, hey, we want to set the gender to true. And what that will do is actually create it if it doesn't exist. So you can go here and now you can find it and you can see that it went ahead and created it. So that is updating. In the next section, we're going to talk about deletion. The last thing that we need to discuss is deleting data. And now that we covered how to find and update data with filters, deleting data is not going to be that difficult. Now, of course, there's two commands that we are going to be using. We're going to be using the delete one command or the delete many command. So let's just begin with the delete one command. And let's say that we want to delete this right over here, this document, because, well, the type is equal to snake. That's not really ultimately what we want. That really is not a mammal. So what we can do is we can do db.mammals.delete1. And then in here, we have to specify our filter. So we can basically say ID is equal to whatever this ID is. So we can say over here, ID is equal to that. And then we can essentially paste that in there. And essentially what's going to happen ultimately is it's going to delete the document that matches this filter. So you can see here that it actually went ahead and deleted it. Now, of course, we can add really complicated filters. We can basically delete maybe all the animals that are older than 45, let's say. So let's go ahead and let's do a db.mammals.find. And let's just find them all for now. Of course, let's prettify it, just so we can see which animals are going to be deleted. So all the animals that are older than 45, that's going to be John the elephant, as well as Sammy. So we should see John and Sammy gone. So we can just do db.delete many in this case, delete many. And then over here, we can just say that, hey, we want to delete all the animals where the age is greater than, or equal to 45. We execute this. This doesn't work for some odd reason. So db.delete many is not a function. And I believe this is because it's just delete at the moment. Oh, never mind. That's just because it's not db, it's mammals dot. And then over here we can say delete many. So there we go. I just forgot the collection. Now we can execute this. You can see that we have deleted 2. Now if we find it, you can see that Sammy and well, the 2 elephants are gone. I forgot what the other elephant was. Let's double check. We have Sammy is gone, as well as John. You can see here all of those animals. And we can specify really any sort of filter that we learned in the previous sections. We can have the logical or comparison operators in there. To delete every single record inside of our database, you just do delete many. And then we can just specify, as always, just an empty object. And that's going to delete every record. And that pretty much sums it up for the MongoDB crash course. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.